Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Oh, Miles here.
Your owl post for this week is freshly delivered, and I am just one of the hosts here, Matthew Rushing, and with me, as she is always, the effervescent Andrea Coffman. How are you, Andrea?
Hello. I'm good. A little tired, but hanging in there. And yourself?
You know what? I feel the same, although I'm sure my tired doesn't equate to your tired, because, well, I don't have a kid.
Who screams and cries every hour.
Yeah, no, I don't have that. So, my wife, no, just kidding. just kidding. No, but it's going well. So, this, we're really getting into the fun sections of this book, and there's so much happening. So I'm so excited to talk about the Firebolt today. But before we do that, just a reminder to everyone, hey, you can find all the shows here on the Nerd Party all over the place, but iTunes is really the best place to go. And we'd really appreciate it while you're checking out all those shows if you'd give Owl Post a rating and review and help more people continue to find the show. Honestly, we've been growing by leaps and bounds, and that's really coming from people sharing the show, talking about the show to their friends, social media, and, of course, by having people review us, and so more people find us when they look us up. So make sure you check that out and do that for us. And, of course, subscribe, too, because you'll get the shows when we publish them. And then you can find us on Twitter at Join Nerd Party. We're on Facebook at facebook.com/The Nerd Party. And then we're online at thenerdparty.com, where if you go to thenerdparty.com/contact, you can choose a show. You can send us an email, and that way Drea and I can get that, talk to you like that. And if you have something that's really, really interesting, we might be able to bring that up on the show. So make sure you do that. But here at this part of the book, we had just left Harry, and he had heard the horrible story about Sirius Black, and he finds himself, honestly, he doesn't know how he gets back to the castle. And for the rest of the evening, he pretty much doesn't want to talk to anybody, which I totally understand. But one thing that gets brought up here that really don't see too much in the movies is the gift that Hagrid gave him at the very last part of the very first book, which is the pictures of his parents. And I really like that Harry grabs that, brings that out, and starts looking through it and realizing that the picture of his parents' wedding, there is that best man standing there. And it's such a, like, I don't even know what it would be like to have that experience. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the feeling of this sort of looking back and seeing a completely different person and seeing things in a different way than you did before, right? You know, he's like laughing and smiling and happy, and it's just not the same person that I've seen in all the newspapers and I keep hearing about. He's like, it was like really surreal. And he's like, it just feels like two different people. And it is really hard to think about that. I mean, I think we've all sort of had something happen, to a loved one, a friend, or a family member, where you look back and like, look how happy they were, or look how different they were, or whatever. It's surreal for us in that sense, but I can't even imagine what it's like to be like, oh, so this is the man who got my parents killed. Great.
Well, and it's so interesting because he really hasn't talked to anybody all night. Ron even comes in and he pretends to be asleep. But the way that she writes it is that he has a hatred that he's never known coursing through him like poison, and that he can see Black standing there laughing, and it's just kind of this waking nightmare that he's having as something in him. I think, I mean, the way she's describing it almost kind of feels like there's a brokenness that happens, like there's a real sense of change here for Harry and who he is. And I think it's a really, it's even hard to describe, but it feels like there is a distinct difference now in Harry with what's happened and what he's found out. Like, life just got a lot darker for this kid.
Yeah, I mean, this is almost like that, I don't know, that moment where Harry becomes, I don't want to say an adult because I don't think he's quite there yet, but this is definitely like that stepping stone. Like, this is a new chapter in Harry's like maturity and development. He's starting to enter this like angsty teenager phase, the one you go through before you sort of wise up and become an adult. But he's going through this letting his emotions sort of take charge phase. And we see that here where he starts talking about like, maybe I should listen to Malfoy and maybe I should take revenge. And, I'm considering it. And Hermione's like, I can't believe you listened to Malfoy over us. He's entering this, I'm going to act on impulse and let my emotions drive me. Sort of, he just hints at it here. And that's kind of where we start to see that really start to amp up now, which is, just like the next phase in his life, if you will.
Well, and having that conversation that he does in the morning with Ron and Hermione, because it's the beginning of the holiday season and he doesn't get to sleep until, early in the morning. And so he doesn't really get up until lunch, basically. And so they're having this conversation with him where they're really worried that he's going to go searching for Black. And, Harry has a good point in the anger that he has in saying, look, you heard Fudge. Black wasn't affected by these Dementors. What does it matter if they catch him again? It's not going to hurt him. And so you can understand why he would be so angry and why he would feel this compulsion to want to kill them. Because kind of, in a lot of ways, Harry's kind of experiencing that Batman thing. Like, what if he came face to face with the guy who killed his parents? And he's come face to face with Voldemort, right? But this is the guy who's responsible for betraying his parents. So it's that kind of thing. What would you do if you came up against that person, and why would you take out your revenge on them? And I think it's a really interesting thing because it actually is going to be something that plays into the very next chapter, with some conversations he has with Lupin about some things. And so we're starting that here, and it's interesting too to watch Harry try to talk with Ron and Hermione about this, but realize how could they ever understand what I'm saying? Like, this isn't really something that you can understand with I mean, you can't really empathize, you can just sympathize, because you haven't been through this.
Yeah, it's one of those moments where I think Harry realizes how he can have this deep, meaningful connection with, Ron and Hermione, but that they'll never really understand what he goes through. And that it's one of those moments where I think he feels pretty alone. And I think we've talked before about how Rowling kind of plays with weaving this theme of depression and how it feels to feel things alone and all by yourself, and just the feelings of it. And I think this again is sort of just a little piece of that, is she just reminds you that there's these feelings and that are very unique to him, and he just feels like no one else understands him and no one else can understand him. And to an extent, it's true, no one can actually understand what you're feeling, but I think that we are going to find characters throughout the series that can kind of relate in their own way. But I think this is the first one of those moments where he realizes it's not Ron and Hermione, that they're not going to be able to relate with him on the level that he's feeling right now. So I think it's like a reminder. He kind of comes back to it every once in a while in the books. You find that he revisits this feeling. And I think between feeling alone and remembering his mother's screams, and his restless sleep, and then paired with his anger at Sirius Black, I think this is the volatile combination we're getting here in this chapter. We start to mix it up a little bit.
Well, and it's driven home when Hermione's like, your parents wouldn't want you to go looking for Black and get hurt.
Yeah.
And Harry's like, how would I know what they want? They're dead. Black took them away from me. It's just kind of that awful place, and there's really nothing to say. And I love Ron trying to make it better. He's like, why don't we go visit Hagrid? And Harry's like, oh, that's a great idea. We can ask him why he never told me about Black and why he killed my parent, and I love her internal monologue for Ron, this is not what I was thinking.
That's not where I wanted that to go.
But it's so awesome because they go to Hagrid's house and they Hagrid's like, he's crying and it's just sobbing, and they read this letter about how Buckbeak is now going to be put on trial for the incident with Malfoy and how he's so worried about it. And you might have worried at the beginning of the chapter, oh, Harry's got this anger coursing through him like poison, and yet that poison is expunged here by his feelings for wanting to help his friend. Harry can put that aside when he realizes that Hagrid is hurting too. Not the same way, but he sees Hagrid's pain and he wants to do something about it. And it's kind of the complexity of the emotions that we're starting to deal with here in the way that Harry's growing, I think is fantastic. But I think it just shows his character. Obviously he's hurt, but when he sees somebody else that's hurt, he wants to try and make it better. And it's kind of beautiful.
It really is. And it's one of those things where it really sets him apart too. And it reminds you how different he is from, characters that have been through this, because this idea of loss and this isolation and anger, these aren't new concepts by any stretch of the imagination, but how she kind of turns them and makes them so that it's him making a choice to care about his friends and his loved ones before himself is, kind of the unique expression of that, at least at the time of that. So it is really nice to be able to see him put aside, be able to let go of that for a while, to be supportive and kind, and not let the anger consume him entirely.
Well, and I think the thing about it is that what we see here, it does find, this does exactly what Ron wanted it to do, is it tempers Harry's anger. And it kind of puts things, I think, in a bit of a perspective for him. And it's just really interesting to watch that happen. And Ron is so great in this chapter, how he's like, they're trying to comfort Hagrid about they're going to help him with the defense and everything. And Ron's like, should I make a cup of tea? And Harry's just staring at him. He's like, well, my mom always makes tea when somebody's upset, and so they make tea and everything, and it becomes this a cathartic experience, and it's exactly what Ron hoped would happen, And I think it's also interesting that we kind of learned something about the wizarding world in that, Hagrid doesn't really feel like they have much of a chance because the people who are a part of this board, don't really have a problem putting special creatures to death. It doesn't really bother them all that much. And so you kind of get this sense that, Hagrid and people like him are pretty unique when it comes to magical creatures. And, the way we treat our creatures is a reflection of who we are. And to see that that's also a part of the magical world as well is a very interesting thing.
Well, and it becomes a much larger part of one of the characters' sort of journeys here as we get through the series too. So she really, that really resonates with one of these people. as we go on. Not gonna give too many spoilers.
Yeah, no. Well, and what's kind of neat too is that this is a moment before things blow up again, because they're about to. That Ron and Hermione kind of spend the next few days studying in the library and bringing books back to the common room and really searching through things and trying to figure out the best way to mount this defense. It's a great Christmas Eve, in the Great Hall, and then they get their presents and they're super excited, and Harry gets a firebolt for Christmas, which, I mean, not bad to get the world's most expensive broom.
Right. I mean, we talked about earlier, he was really eyeing it at the store, but he was even just too afraid to ask how much it was, and now he has it.
Which,
and it's like, what?
Which I absolutely love that as they've opened their Christmas presents, they're not down in the common room, they're in their dormitory. And I like how Hermione can just come sauntering into the boys' dormitory at Christmas time, and she brings Crookshanks, which is not the best idea because he's still looking for Scabbers, who this starts a whole thing as Crookshanks is scurrying around looking for Scabbers, sets off the sneakoscope, things start to go haywire. Hermione's not quite sure that this is the best idea to have a firebolt, and things just generally start to go to crap already.
Everything sort of goes at the same time.
Yeah, it's not good. It's not good.
And I love that you get a very tiny taste of this in the movies. You get just like this tiniest little hint of this Crookshanks Scabbers like feud, if you will. It's like its own little like Tom and Jerry subplot. She touches on it very briefly in the movies, but in the book she keeps going back to it. It keeps happening and knowing what the end result is, it's really interesting now to think about it. Like, Crookshanks is supposed to be a magical cat. I don't know why anyone's not paying attention to the fact that he is relentlessly after Scabbers, like relentlessly. So I love that every chapter or so it pops back up. Here's another little couple pages or another little paragraph on it. Here's the chaos that ensues.
Well, and I love that, they have a good Christmas morning. They go down to the feast and everything. And this feast is pretty hysterical because Trelawney comes down to visit, and goodness, McGonagall cannot stop herself from poking fun at Sybil. Like, she just can't stop herself. And I find it very funny because it's kind of a Hermione thing to do. Hermione can't stop herself from being snarky about things that she doesn't think are important in life.
Are valid.
Yeah. And it is really, really funny when she's like, I'm certain that you knew that, Trelawney. Trelawney, well, I just, it's not nice to, flaunt your all-knowing, all-seeing eye in front of everyone. It's just the back and forth between them is hysterical. And I kind of wish we had more of that in the movie because it's really funny stuff. But we also learned that Lupin is sick again, and Snape has made him the potion again at dinner.
Yeah, poor guy. I mean, he's just always sick.
Yeah, I feel really bad for him. So
I do too.
The day has been filled, the Christmas day has been filled with a lot of tension, but everything's been going really well for them. Finally, they get back to their room. Harry and Ron are really excited to work on the Firebolt with his broom servicing kit that Hermione had gotten him last year. And I love that they pull it out and they're like, well, there's no loose twigs. Okay. No, don't need to do that. Well, I mean, it's already shiny enough. Okay, guess we don't need to do that. Let's just look at it. They're just like sitting on the couch looking at it. It's awesome.
It's like when you get something new at Christmas and you're like, you get like I don't know, a phone. Even when you get like a new phone or a new computer, and you're like, I don't know what I'm gonna do, but I'm just gonna sit here and I'm gonna open it. I'm gonna put this laptop in my lap, and I'm gonna be like,
Yes.
okay, what do I do now?
Yeah, no, it's absolutely hysterical, and I because we've all had that feeling. Like I was thinking about how I feel every year when I actually put up the Christmas tree, and you just kind of want to sit and look at it. Like it's not doing
Mm-hmm.
anything. It's gonna be there when I come back, but I just want to look at it. It's just it's magical.
Okay, okay, yeah, yeah. And you just have like that excited, just like look on your face, and you're like,
Yes.
yeah.
Well,
I can just see them sitting like it down, and they're just like sitting there staring at it, like, what do we do with it? We can't do anything with it right now, but what do we do with it?
yeah.
And this is where I wish people could see my face, because it's like, it was weird. Look, I'll take a picture and put it up online, because why not? Because I feel like you need it to get the full effect
You really
of what's
did.
happening
You
right
really
now.
did. I feel so sorry for you, listeners, that you can't see that. But that moment is ruined when Hermione comes in with Professor McGonagall, and they proceed to take the Firebolt because they're afraid that it may have been jinxed. And, she says that her and Professor Flitwick are going to strip this down and figure it out and make sure it's safe, all because they think it may have been sent by Sirius Black.
And I love that, but I love how she does it, because it's very Hermione and very much like, it's very fitting for their characters that, they, she comes in with her and they take it away and start talking about how it's gonna, be stripped, and Ron's like, you're gonna do what now? And Harry's just like, what's happening? And Ron's like, wait, you're gonna do what now? And then, nobody's really telling him why. And then we get to the end, and Hermione's like, well, I mean, McGonagall agrees with me, but we think Sirius Black sent it to you. Like, they don't tell him up front. There's no context. They're not like, okay, well, so we think this is from Sirius Black, and here's what we're gonna do. They're just like are flying past it, and then they're like, oh, and this is why. And Hermione's like very matter of fact. She likes to know that she knows and nobody else knows why. It's very fitting for the characters, and it's one of those where I think everyone can relate to something happening to you. You're in a doctor's office and the doctor's doing something to you, and you're like, I don't know what's happening. Someone tell me what's happening. Everyone knows but me.
Well, and it's a frustrating thing, I think, because this is one of those places where Hermione just doesn't necessarily handle it as well as she should have. Like, she hasn't... When she first saw the Firebolt, she doesn't really say anything. She's just kind of like... She's not really excited, or she just kind of was like, and she never talks to the boys about it at all, really, afterwards, and then makes this decision to go talk to McGonagall, and then, of course, shows up in the common room, and they take the Firebolt away, and it's just... She's not very tactful, and I'm sure that even if she had had the conversation, it wouldn't have gone over swimmingly with the boys, but at least they would have had the conversation, and they would have known what was going on, and they wouldn't have been blindsided, because #blindside just happened. It's like Survivor. And it's no wonder that, when you're 13 years old, you would be kind of pissed. I get kind of upset when people do that to me in these days.
And we're not.
I'm not 13 anymore.
You're not 13.
No. So
yeah, I think it's one of those things where it makes you feel good as Hermione. It makes you feel like you're smart and you're doing the right thing, and you're the only person who knows, and it's like this win, right? But ultimately, the effect that it has on others is what you sacrifice, if that's making any sense, right? Like, she thinks she did the right thing because she knows what's happening. She doesn't want to be the killjoy. She wants to go and be the one to tell McGonagall that she realized that it's a problem, and she's bringing it up, and she's doing the right thing. And then she gets back to them and realizes, like, oh, Like, it's just that time where you're like, okay, yeah, so maybe that was the right thing to do, but maybe the better thing to do would be to talk to us collectively and be like, shouldn't we be concerned about this? And then if you feel like you need to make the right call after everyone talking about it, going to McGonagall and her taking it away, then you could be like, look, I told you I thought it was a problem. I talked to the teacher because I didn't agree that it was fine, versus kind of doing it sneaky behind the back. It's very, I don't know. It's a combination of her not wanting to make a scene and her wanting to be right.
That is a really good way to put it. Yeah, like Hermione is one of those people who likes to be right. And sometimes that gets in the way of her maybe necessarily putting her friends' feelings into account, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And you can tell, when they open the present and Hermione comes in and sees that he's got a firebolt, you can tell what she's already thinking, with the fact that she just kind of keeps it to herself instead of having that conversation maybe sometime that day with the boys. It's just one of those things where it makes sense why in the next chapter they're not talking to Hermione. And it's just again, it is also one of those places where it's part of being 13, and things feel like the biggest things in the world. And for Harry, who doesn't have a broom as well, and Quidditch is ramping back up, and he gets the world's best broom and then has it taken away within hours of getting it. It's one of those places where you can just feel like it's their frustration, and you can kind of see it from both sides, because too, Hermione isn't just doing this because she wants to be right. She's doing it because she also wants to keep her friends safe. And maybe that's something that the boys will realize later on, but I guess we'll have to wait till next chapter to see. So,
well, and it's something that reminds you that they're still kids, right?
Yes.
Hermione understands this is probably the right thing to do, and I think eventually they'll understand that this was the right thing to do. But they're kids. They're upset, like you said, Harry lost his broom and he wants to go back and play Quidditch, and to him, winning that house cup is the most important thing, and he's probably even frustrated. I don't think they touch on it much in this chapter, but you have to imagine he's frustrated with McGonagall too, who wants him to win the house cup, but is taking away his broomstick, like this amazing broom. So there's just some parts of him that it feeds into that part of us that can't understand when something's very unfair to us, and you can't understand why people are being so unfair to you, and it's so overwhelming and frustrating for you, and you're like, why did you screw me over and all that. We've all felt that, and we still tend to feel it in different ways as we get older, but as a kid it's just so very black and white. They're just mean. That's when you start calling them jerk faces and butt heads and stuff like that. So so I think it's just interesting that Hermione's the one that sort of screws them over, if you will. I mean, it's not surprising, but I mean, who's shocked? Raise your hand if you're shocked that Hermione's the one following the rules.
Yeah,
that's what I thought.
Well, yeah. It is very true. I'm really excited to see where we go, because the next chapter is the Patronus, and we're really digging into some of the things that have been set up now in the book, and we're starting to dive in more and more, and I can't wait to get there. But before we do, because we'll have to wait till next week, where can everybody find you, Dre, if they want to talk to you about some things?
You can find me on Twitter at PCFChick, or on Instagram at Drea Coffman. It's Coffman. And if I'm not there, I'm probably asleep with my infant. So, it's where you can find me.
You could find me on Twitter as well, Matt Rushing02. I'm on Instagram under the same name. You can find me here on the network with John Mills talking about Star Wars on Aggressive Negotiations. I'm also on the Trek FM network doing The Orb with Chris Jones talking about Star Trek Deep Space Nine. the 602 Club, which is the General Geek Show. In fact, Drea was just on there as we talked about Stranger Things too, so check that out. You'll love that show. It's so much fun as we're talking about all our favorite geeky things. And one last show I'm doing with my friend Courtney. It's called Cinema Stories, and that's all about film through the lens of faith. But thank you so much for checking your owl post.
Mischief managed.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.